welcome here to the home of the World Champion, and of course Ferrari's biggest fan and Ferrari's fastest driver, as we are of course going after dominating or after winning the not tactical, but the real fighting battle for the Miami Sprint to record our first ever Miami Sprint victory. We are now going to go to the qualifying for the Miami Grand Prix proper, of course, the proud round 6 of this 2025 FI Formula 1 World Championship. We are absolutely super excited about it, as we are chasing the record-breaking 14th consecutive Grand Prix pole position, right? It hasn't happened actually unbelievably since Italy, when we line up second, when we lost a couple of tenths to Leclerc over here, that we haven't gotten that pole position, even though last time out in Saudi Arabia we did that great penalty. Is it still a pole position? Well, we will keep the record going, but in the sprint qualifying we only were second, and we had to make some changes because the heavens, were about to open as the qualifying has started here in Miami. So the beautiful, glorious sunshine of southern Florida was then replaced, obviously, with the dark, spooky clouds, which were, hugely unpredictable. And we, of course, knew, that was gonna be really, really difficult conditions. They got us out, for example, last year when we did the Chinese Sprint Grand Prix weekend in both qualifying sessions. So we knew that we had to execute, and the key thing was obviously, to decide on what to do with the setup, right? So I felt during the sprint that we had a great top speed, but I felt like we could add in a little bit more wing. But I basically kept the rest of the setup, just as it is. So, once the qualifying one has started, that was probably the key to having a really, really good result and aiming for that pole position. But are we gonna get it? What do you think? Well, obviously you've seen, the Red Hot Lab, right? So you probably know that we were going to be faster in the sprint qualifying. We pretty much knew it right at the beginning. Because the rain was imminent at the start of the qualifying session. So, we did a fantastic job, putting in a set of the soft tires. We can use only 3 though during the Grand Prix weekend, unlike 5, but usually with our tire allocations we use 4 sets, and one is pretty much always medium, could be hard, but some drivers go for 5, but I believe that's unnecessary, especially this year. When you have always such a soft compounds that they are pretty much useless, right, for racing. So, with us always qualifying on pole position, that is absolutely important. So what happened was that we came out relatively early, but already a bit too late. But thankfully we were able to complete that very first lap. So right, so when I was going right through it, I could see the clouds, but I didn't really feel that it started raining. It was maybe only a little bit. Once we were coming out of the final corner, that you will see here when we do the qualifying 3, that maybe set us on pole position, maybe not, but that qualifying 1 lap was absolutely important because, we had a huge, massive slide going through the Miami Marina, of course, which looks beautiful, but, it's really there, where we, with a higher wing, right? We went to, 25-15, I think for a race we will go 20-15 because it will be, again, a beautiful, glorious day full of sunshine. We were able to catch it, and it was absolutely critical because if you were not able to catch it, the track was just getting worse and worse. So very, very reminiscent of what happened in China last year. But thankfully, I was able to finish the lap and just ahead of Hamilton. So 1:33.5 was actually very comfortable for us to get into the Q2. Guys like Verstappen, for example, my closest title challenger, out in P18. What a sore loser! So actually, we were quite happy about this. And then qualifying 2 came, right? And qualifying 2. It was already raining quite a lot, so we put on the set of the intermediate tires, and I thought we did a good job. We, of course, wanted to top the qualifying session because normally we would be topping the practice sessions, topping the qualifying sessions, really dominating the season. But in Miami, that wasn't the case, even though sprint was fantastically executed, from our side. We hope the Grand Prix will be similarly, done as well. But yeah, what basically happened was that we even went in for a bit more of a fuel, just try to get the P1, but no, it still beat us to it. So we finished P2, but I was like, okay, at least this setup seems to be working pretty well in the intermediate conditions. So and no matter what the weather will throw it at us at Q3, we should be fine. So are we gonna go to the full wets or stay in the intermediates? No, the track started drying up, right? And one guy, the most experienced guy who has 7 of these lovely trophies, Lewis Hamilton, that made a mistake by not going out, and I almost made the same mistake because I went out, did a decent job, but I was basically in a P5, and then I saw the track drying out and I was going purple, but I'm like, no, the crossover is there. I can see hardly any water on the racing line. Then I would change to the set of the softs, and that was critical over here because otherwise, I would have ended up on the 5th row like Hamilton, who qualified 10th, who didn't even venture out. All the other 9 drivers, including me, did. But then you only had 1 lap, right? So it was dead lap or nothing. And it was quite slippery, when I was going out of the pits, but you could tell that the soft tire is going to be definitely quicker than anything you could do on the intermediates. And yeah, you will see, I think we can say now, sadly, it won't be the 14th, Grand Prix proper pole position in a row, which would again, just extend a fantastic outright record by 6 Grand Prix. Because we qualified 4th, and to be honest, it all probably came down to the beginning of the lap, where we were just simply too cautious, right? On the throttle, we didn't go through the gears properly, but you could see, I still, was touching the curbs. It was hard to get, the power down, and especially to have the traction, kind of what happened in Q1, with that big double slide through. Miami Marina definitely played, a little bit into it, so I was just like, okay, let's, go over here, and then actually I had pretty much a lot of grip, from the first, as we were leaving the Hard Rock Stadium into the Miami Gardens, I actually, brake a little bit earlier, but, could have, the turn-in could have been on the power more, and, it's a bit of a pity because in the end we were 1.7, seconds from pole position, again, very busy qualifying session, especially that very busy final lap, but yeah, we were missing some of the approaches, some of the breaking points, as a result, right? So for example, in the middle straight, there, going underneath, then the crest and then onto the back straight, when I was braking for it, I actually braked a little bit later because I thought, okay, it was just difficult to judge what exactly the exact breaking point with the level of the grip was. Who judged it to perfection was Oscar Piastri, who will end this amazing run of the Smalley champion and Ferrari's fastest driver. But we destroyed obviously our teammate, and also Norris and George Russell has gotten ahead of me. But then we have lots of the other drivers, basically not even making it, into it. So in the top 4, you have pretty much the main contenders, and actually one of them will then get a grid penalty, so we will start P3. That's a big news, which I think will make that quest for the second, you can see the second 2 Formula 1 Grand Prix winners trophy, the Miami victory, even better. So now let's take a look at this will be very unusual, for us, for all of you fans, pretty much 8 months, isn't it? Yes, 8 months, ever since, we were not on pole position for a Grand Prix. So everybody, let me turn around the Scuderia Red Retina iMac. We will accelerate out of the, the final before the penultimate chicane, the corner, and onto the Hard Rock Stadium, as we brave the elements, as we chasing the history over here, but ultimately fall down short to a very unpopular P4. But as you can see from my real life reaction, I was actually quite happy with that lap. So let's take a look. A beautiful shiny golden medal for the 2 times in a row. You won't be on my neck, that is for sure. Okay, so over here, everybody, you can see, it's so different from what the sprint was like. Okay, so let me take it out over here. You can see very beautiful setup, I absolutely love the color. And this is, what we are always aiming for, you guys, the Formula 1, the championships, the 5-star one. So here we are, okay? So you can see the Hard Rock Stadium, obviously, right up there. Okay, let me just adjust it slightly so we can see it perfectly. And this is gonna be the lap that yielded P4 for my 3rd Miami Grand Prix. Are you ready? Go, Smalley champion, go!
30 seconds left in the session.
This is it, P4. Look at that. Okay, so yeah, it was here in this section right at the beginning where we lost it here to the pole sitter Oscar Piastri of McLaren over here. Yeah, big disappointment for us, but actually, I was just happy to get through the session over here. And once we of course analyzed where exactly we lost 1.5 seconds in the first sector alone. So definitely I was kind of tiptoeing. You could see that there were basically 1, 2, 3, the first 3 turns definitely much slower than they could have been, even that approach onto the marina. And actually going through the marina, right, when we would then use a lot of the throttle, we brake too early. So definitely the pole position could have been on the cards. It belongs to the McLaren boys, Piastri from Norris, as they set the time of 1:30.801, which is of course almost 3 seconds slower than what it could have been. Third is then George Russell, who is with Verstappen, our closest challenger, and we will see who will then actually start in front of me, because one of them will get a penalty. I believe it will be Norris, but we will see. Fourth is then me, Jan Lukša, the Svalixan champion for Scuderia Ferrari, the qualifying fourth, just ahead of Carlos Sainz, whose seat we've taken, who returns back to our series for Williams. Great result, but you can see quite a surprising qualifying. 6, Isaac Hadjar for Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. 7, Pierre Gasly Alpine. 8, Fernando Alonso Aston Martin. 9, Yuki Tsunoda Red Bull. And 10, Lewis Hamilton, who didn't go out at all for Scuderia Ferrari. And yeah, that basically cost him, all of the positions. So yeah, we made the right, choice, but it is so difficult to deliver in such conditions. And frankly speaking, we haven't. We could have done better. That is for sure. But on the other hand, you could have also spin out very easily. So I'm just, pleased that, okay, we've gotten through the qualifying, more like a damage limitation. But of course, when you chasing records, yeah, it's too easy to say, okay, be happy about P4. We cannot be happy, about it, I think, at all. Having said that, I think, yeah, now the record is established at the unlucky 13, which is, kind of a destiny, isn't it? So we won't be celebrating with that shiny, golden Olympics medal for the pole sitter over here. Yeah, definitely, the worst result, since, the sprint qualifying for the Brazilian GP, where we had 14th actually. But I think, if he's gonna start third, this is, again, we survived the Q1. That was the most difficult one. We showed a really good pace, with the setup in the Q2. And over here, if you look at it, at the sector 1 alone, we lost, 1.5 seconds. We really could have gone quicker, but it's difficult, right? Because once you slide in such conditions, that's a game over. So over here, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, you could see that, the lap was good, well executed. I mean, we clearly were, sometimes just going on a traction, as we try to really, squeeze out the most. We also haven't used most of the battery, so definitely the lap time was there. So I'm very confident that we can win our second Miami Grand Prix. I think for the race proper, we're definitely going to start on the mediums, but it will be interesting if we can make it to about lap 25 or definitely 27. So we could do the one-stop strategy, or will it be a two-stop strategy? We do have the tires for that, because remember, over here we only used the 2 sets of the soft tires, and we haven't used the soft tires in a sprint. So maybe medium soft could be a potential strategy as well, or using all 3 sets for the two-stop strategy, or probably medium hard soft. I would have imagined, we can't do our favorite medium soft because, yeah, the tire degradation will be severe once the sun comes back. So, we are still dancing in Miami in the rain, in the sunshine, as we ready to extend our championship lead. And of course, we didn't get, our 75th pole position of our illustrious career, but I'm sure we can get the 76th, podium with the 60-second victory, and hopefully we can add the 60-second fastest lap as well that Hamilton just stole from us by 1400ths of a second. This was Jan, the Smiling Sun champion, who loves racing here in Miami, no matter what the conditions. And even though we are not on pole position, we're gonna be going for it. So everybody, stay tuned. We love racing. We love Formula 1. We love Ferrari. Forza Ferrari. Okay. Welcome to Hard Rock Stadium, everybody. Come on, man. We've always been on pole position here. Come on, man. We're going for it. Come on, man.
30 seconds left in session.
Come on, man. Come on. Come on, man. Copy 4, come on, come on. Oh, that was difficult. Drying check. Yeah, this is, the qualifying was very, very tough here at the end, but yeah, wow, we lost that, run over here. Yeah, we simply, we made the right choice, I believe. Let me just double check over here. Wow, 1.7 seconds in the end. There were quite a big differences. Yeah, it kind of depended, on when you went out as well. But over here, yeah, I have to say that we looked, pretty good. You see, Hamilton didn't come out, so it's not gonna be a pole position here in Miami because, it was a difficult session. But I think, P4, while far from perfect, obviously McLaren locked out the front row. I think, we clearly didn't have, the pace, at the beginning of the lap. You could see that we lost a lot of time there, but then, I felt, maybe we outbreak ourselves, so P3, P2 was maybe possible, but yeah, with Piastri time 30.8, we would have had to, dig in deep, obviously, but in such conditions, when you just come out, the track is still, dump in places, it's very, very difficult, but you could see that we were easily able to pull up, over a second on the other guys, so yeah, I thought it was a decent lap, but yeah, this great run, so the unlucky 13 in Saudi Arabia finished it, because here in Miami, just like in the last race last year with the Chinese sprint, we were caught up with such conditions, and that's really difficult, to judge, like, should you go later, when you should go. Here it was actually quite clear, so after amazing sprint victory, I think we will definitely be, especially with Verstappen, being P18, our main challenger, and we are right next to Russell. I think we have a great chance here to win the Grand Prix, and that's what matters. Just what a pity that this is the first time we haven't topped any of the qualifying sessions. Qualifying 1, it started raining, we were happy to put in P9, we almost lost it around the Miami Marina over there, and then and when we went out, qualifying 2, obviously, it was raining quite a lot, but I thought we had the ultimate pace. I mean, you could kind of tell, that I was actually able, even with the really old intermediate tires, to pretty much really notice, but in the end, I was just second by a tenth of a second, and then, here basically at the beginning, we were setting purple at the end, but it basically showed us that, or signaled to us that, the overall best is about 1 minute 27, right? So here we were still 3-5 seconds off it, and the main reason, of course, was because the track was, drying out. But at that point, when we've gotten to about less than 10 seconds, almost 5 seconds, it was clear everybody had to go bar Lewis Hamilton on the soft tires, and I was, I thought the lap was good, but again, we went, kind of a purple as well, but it was just not, possible to deliver more, and I think we know where, because in that first sector, clearly, we've lost lots of time. But hey, P4, it could have been much worse, but it really hurts because we had such an amazing run, and here I think if the conditions stay the same, so either completely dry or completely wet, that is always the best, to manage it. But when you have such conditions, it's a lot about luck as well, because I believe the McLarens, for example, especially with Norris, they were even, or Piastri, they were pretty much behind us. We also, I think, that lap, wasn't really great, I would say, again, outbraking, going into, obviously, that section around the highway and into the back straight, that definitely, cost us at least half a second. So, we know kind of where we lost it, but again, I was 1.7 seconds behind, and I think, that's simply down to the fact that Piastri was one of the guys who went out, I think, earlier and was simply able to warm up his tires, probably a little bit more. That could have been also the reason, again, Alonso was behind me, when we were doing intermediate laps, but this time no shenanigans. So again, this now is a run of obviously 2, races, again, sprint races like we had with China last year, right, where we didn't put it on pole position. But you can see, unlike for the sprint qualifying, where I was really disappointed, where I pretty much had it, and that we should be able to execute over here. We were just, seeing what will happen that last run. Guys like Hachar, for example, or Gasly, or Sainz, were putting it on pole position. So, that's, also, quite good. So it will be basically us against the McLarens and against George. And I think, we should have the pace over them. We will see how about the tire degradation. Obviously, Norris came at me. I fought with Russell, but my big fight was with Verstappen. So we will see what happens. Hope you enjoyed this qualifying over here. You could really feel the disappointment, right? So we will start from the black sheet of paper. I'm happy that we said, the overall best of obviously 13. That's 13. Amazing consecutive Grand Prix pole positions, and 11 proper consecutive, pure pole positions, including the sprint races. And we will see, in the sprint, we executed it really well. We are leading the sprint championship, and no matter what, we will be leading the drivers championship as a result, also for Scuderia Ferrari. So this is exactly what we really wanted. And again, stay tuned. We will be chasing our second victory here in Miami, so we are definitely looking forward to that. Obviously, that will be our 60-second victory, also for 60-second fastest lap. We really want to go for it. Our 76th podium. If we just make it onto the podium, this would have been the 75th pole. But what a pity, because I think if the conditions stay or turn dry earlier, I think that we would have had the best chance to plant it on pole position. But the good thing from this is also we have one fresh set of all the tires, so softs, mediums, and hards, and I think we can run the strategy pretty well. Medium, hard, perhaps soft, we will see. I think that's what we will do. So stay tuned for the race in Miami over here. I'm so disappointed. I got 3 Miami poles, 2 for the Grand Prix, 1 for the sprint in the previous 2 editions, but didn't add anything to it. But thankfully we've gotten that Miami sprint victory, and now let's go for more. We love racing, we love Formula